TheVeryovkina Cave. At 7,257 feet deep, TheVeryovkina Cave is the deepest cave on Earth. The cave is so deep that it takes over 4 days and thousands of feet of rope to descend to its immense depth. And certainly, what would the deepest cave be without a couple of horrifying incidents? These are those stories. On the border of Russia and Georgia is a mountain range known as the Caucasus Mountains. This mountain range is notable for a few reasons. First, it's home to Europe's highest peak, Mount Elbrus, at 18,500 feet. Then, on the western side of the region of Abkhazia is a sub-range of the Caucasus Mountains known as the Gagra Range. There are some decent-sized mountains in this area as well, the highest among them is just over 11,000 feet, but this area is notable for another reason. The Gagra Range is primarily a limestone mountain range carved out by rivers over its geological history. The prehistoric rivers created a bunch of deep canyons and the largest caves on Earth that are currently known. In fact, the Gagra Mountains are home to 4 of the deepest caves anywhere on Earth, and the deepest of these is TheVeryovkina Cave at over 7,000 feet deep. For context, that's the same as stacking 23 Statue of Liberties on top of one another. The entrance to TheVeryovkina Cave is also located at an altitude of 7,500 feet, meaning that you have to climb up a literal mountain to get to it. Once you're up there, you're still surrounded by the rocky cliffs of the mountain ranges, and then in the middle of these cliffs is a fairly unremarkable looking hole in the ground. It's obvious that it's the entrance to a cave, but you never expect it to descend for over a mile into the earth. When the entrance was first discovered in 1968 by a group of cavers, they only descended down to a depth of 377 feet before returning to the surface. Then in 1983, the cave was discovered for a second time by a separate team of speleologists from the TheVeryovkina Club from Moscow. Over the next 3 years, a series of expeditions pushed the depth to around 1,400 feet, but then for reasons that are unclear, there were no more expeditions until the year 2000. Work resumed again that year, but it would take all the way until 2015 to discover a new shaft that would unlock the true depth of TheVeryovkina Cave. By 2017, they had extended the maximum depth of the cave from 1,400 feet all the way to 7,200 feet and mapped over 17 kilometers of tunnels and passages. Then finally in March of 2018, the official deepest point of the cave was discovered at the bottom. 6 months later in September, the TheVeryovkina team returned once again to continue exploring the cave. And this time, they were joined by photographers Robbie Stone and Jeff Wade. It was this same team of world-class cavers from the TheVeryovkina Club that made all of the seminal descents of TheVeryovkina and of the other deep caves in the Gagra mountain range. Led by team leader Pavel Demidov, this expedition would be returning to the bottom of TheVeryovkina Cave to collect samples of some of the potentially undiscovered species and explore some of the promising horizontal passages at the bottom of the cave, all while having Robbie and Jeff document the entire thing. Now, in an ordinary cave of moderate depth, where you can descend and ascend in a single day, you'd still be bringing a decent amount of equipment because you need food and a bunch of climbing gear for every single person on the team. In caves as large as TheVeryovkina Cave, the descent is more similar to an expedition that you'd expect to see when climbing a tall mountain. If you've ever watched anything related to Mount Everest, you may have heard of the multi-camp system. These camps are established higher and higher up the mountain to store food and gear and for the climbers to sleep and stay in between climbing. For multi-day expeditions on a mountain or in a deep enough cave, the amount of gear becomes way too much to transport at a single time. People have to climb up and down in advance to transport load after load of the necessary equipment to ensure a safe attempt. And TheVeryovkina Cave is no different. In fact, because of how deep it is, it has a total of 6 camps at various depths on the way to the bottom. From the entrance, climbers have to put on special clothing, harnesses, and helmets fixed with headlamps. They then descend down the first shaft into the darkness and move through a series of tight tunnels and passages to reach the first camp at 2,000 feet. This camp is a permanently installed camp where gear and equipment are stored year-round for emergencies. Then, over the course of the next 4 days, Robbie, Jeff, and the TheVeryovkina Club made their way to Camp 6 all the way down at 6,900 feet. On their way, the temperature was just a few degrees above freezing. They crawled through mud and water, impossibly tight squeezes, and descended down 100-foot shafts over nothing but air. The thousands of feet of ropes that they used to make the descent were their only means of transportation in and out. Then finally, they set foot onto the flat, sandy Camp 6 set up in a large horizontal tunnel. This would be their home for the remainder of the expedition. Over the next 3 days, the team set out from their camp to complete all of the tasks they had intended. One of these was to bring Robbie and Jeff to the lake that sits at the bottom. When they got there, they were stunned to see this beautiful turquoise water surrounded by jet black limestone. The lake is 50 feet long, 25 feet wide, and is actually 28 feet deep. If not for the lights that they brought, it would sit there in complete darkness, entirely without color. On day 7, everything was still going according to plan, and that day, 2 of the members of the team had to leave early to catch a flight home. When they got up to Camp 3, there was a ton of water pouring into the cave. A massive storm up on the surface had caused a flood pulse to send thousands of liters of water rushing in. Inside these caves, you can't really communicate wirelessly because of the thick layers of rock, so instead, cavers have to run a